Hey, welcome in to that SEC podcast, another live show. Cousin Shane, he's out sick, called in last minute as usual, so had to get a guest on. Waiting for him to hop on here as per usual, but little programming note here, actually a couple notes here. A lot of people have been hitting us up for the koozies, which we really appreciate. Again, rate, review, subscribe. Just follow us, give us a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. That's all you got to do, and we'll send you a beer koozie free of charge. Just reach out to us at thatsecpodcast@gmail.com, and that's how we'll get you your koozie. But I did want to make a note. We've had about 100, 200 people reach out to us since we said that on Monday, and we're out of Tennessee koozie. So if you've hit us up for a Tennessee koozie and we've not responded to you yet, just know that we put in an order with our a partner that makes those, and we'll get those out to you. It's probably going to take about 2 weeks, though. But everybody else, we got 13 SEC team koozies ready to send out, again, just for rate, review, and subscribing to the show. And a little programming note, I'm going to be on Paul Feinbaum's show. It's going to be his last show until SEC Media Days. I'm going to open 3 o'clock Eastern, 2 Central. So tune in for me on the Paul Feinbaum show. We got our guest. Let's see if we can get him in here. Hey, buddy.
What's up, dude? You're going to be on Paul Feinbaum tomorrow. I'm going to make sure. I love you to death. I'm probably not going to tune in because I know what you're going to say, and whatever you say, I'm probably not going to like it. Cheers, though.
Yeah, Chris Marler, you're our go-to pinch hitter. I was just saying, Cousin Shane called in sick. That's why I had to reach out to you last minute. I apologize for that, but thank you so much for joining me once again. I got so much positive feedback from you joining us. What was it, a week ago? That I knew if you were able, you'd be up for another good conversation here.
I can't tell if you're joking or not, but if you aren't, that makes me super happy. If you are kidding, it's pretty par for the course. That's fine either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell the folks, I almost called you Shade there, so I apologize. Where can they follow you, Marla? I know we're trying to build you back up here. Yeah,
I lost that Twitter account after a terrible Kirby Smart sex tape joke on April Fool's. That was not my best. It was on April.
I liked it.
It was purely a joke, and with what happened today with some people reporting news, it's probably not the best time to joke around about it. But College Football Uncensored is the podcast. We have a new episode that comes out every Tuesday. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Vern Funquist, VERN. I always say it's a lot of fun in moderation, so you guys join along. It'll be a lot of fun.
Right, absolutely. And speaking of fun, I wanted to have some fun at your expense, of course, and ask you if you were serious. You got mad. You're mad. It seems like you're mad about every half hour on social media, but at me for saying that Tennessee at Alabama, it's a toss-up for Tennessee, but when we did the Alabama preview, I did it as a win. Have you still not caught on to how we're doing this?
No, because I haven't listened to the pod. So this is like the only 2 weeks off of the year. So right. It's like, so when I was asking that question, I knew that it was going to come off as like me being a dickhead because that's just like this. I knew that was going to be how it came across, but I really wasn't trying to be a jerk. I just didn't know like what the process was, and I was trying to understand what it was. So I think one of your listeners was like really kind enough to explain it to me, and it made a lot of sense. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think it's probably spot on if the prerequisites for that are what Tennessee fans are thinking and what Bama fans are thinking. I think that's completely fair.
Right. Yeah. So for those that have yet to get it, and I think all the listeners, they've gotten it, but just people on social media have not, it's from a fan's perspective. So that's how we do each team preview. And I thought maybe it'd be fun if you and I kind of went through some of these teams. I'll throw up the graphic of the win-loss toss, and you tell me maybe games you disagree with across the SEC. How's that sound?
I love it. All
right, so we haven't got to all the teams, but we basically have. And let's start with Georgia. We just did the Georgia preview. It's gone really well. I said 7-5.
Yeah, I saw that. That was beautiful. And you know that someone on Kirby's staff, like I said this last year, and I was kind of kidding, but like part of me was somewhat concerned. It's an incredible job of Kirby to have rallied that locker room around because no one in their right mind thought they were going 7-5, like at all. Maybe they don't get step back because you had the best defense in the history of college football the year before. They didn't. They go 15-0. They're fantastic. But that kid saying the 7-5 thing was about as like believable as like that first or third Santa Claus movie with Tim Allen. Because it's like, did you not pick up on any of the subtle clues? Back to the graphic and the schedule. I got them going 12-0. I don't think it's really up for debate. Like, what do you Tennessee? Like that's the only game on here that makes me remotely pause.
Mm-hmm.
You get Ole Miss after Mizzou. Like there's everything I see on here. Like, I mean, even Vanderbilt. Kirby somehow still hates Vanderbilt because what they did to him in 2020, not letting him have a senior day. He's allowed less than 150 combined yards in their last 2 games against Vanderbilt. But this game against Tennessee, possibly the only thing I don't like about it is the fact that look what else. I mean, like the Ole Miss game might be tough, but it's in Athens. There's nothing. I mean, you get them at the end of the season, so I think this is a cakewalk.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They've dominated Auburn. Maybe Auburn puts up some points, or I don't know what the win would be considered. You get Kentucky at home. They've struggled against Kentucky on the road at times, weirdly enough. I just don't see anything on here until November that makes me shudder at all. And that's the only one. I got them going 12-0.
Right. So the one that I think they need to be concerned about, Chris, is Ole Miss. At home, right before the Tennessee game, maybe you're a little bit more focused on Tennessee, hitting the road to Rocky Top. And we just don't know what Lane Kiffin and company, we just never know with that, the way they utilize the transfer portal. If Jackson Dart has a big year, you know, I mean, it would be a miracle if Ole Miss won. But I think that's probably the one that concerns me the most. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, it completely makes sense. And let me ask you a question, too, on this, because I know that I remember saying this last year. There were 10 total times under Kirby Smart since 2016 that he's given up 30 points or more. One of those games was this is going into the Tennessee game a year ago when I made that video, which is probably a good reason that my old account got shut down, so I don't have to keep reading the comments on that. But like I remember saying this beforehand because that's the best scoring offense in the country last year with Tennessee. This team has come a long way. The program's come a long way. It's not the same as it was in year one, but Hugh Freeze is a guy that has put up over 30 points on a Kirby Smart defense against when he was at Alabama and when he was at Georgia. Any chance you think that there's like an Auburn could upset them?
Yeah, because I think given Georgia's schedule, they still may not at that point in time know exactly what they have. It'll be the first true road game. Yeah. Maybe Carson. I mean, we sit here and we look at Carson Beck and we just assume he's going to be great, and he probably will be. But we were talking about this recently too. What happens if adversity strikes? And adversity's different now for Georgia. It's like Alabama has for the last decade and a half. What if they're only winning by 7 points? I mean, those fan bases, they're going to lose their damn mind saying, how could we barely be getting past South Carolina? And that's not disrespectful to South Carolina. It's you've been killing them by 45 points annually with a new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, new offensive tackles. There is going to be some time, potentially, that it takes to get that thing up and running. And to your point, Hugh Freeze knows how to engineer some points. And it may not even just be the offense. It could be, a special teams play, a block or something. It could be a kick return Georgia drops inside the 5. I mean, there's many things that can happen. What happens if Georgia gets down 14-0 in Jordan-Hare early? How do they respond to that?
So here's a good point on that too, because Jordan-Hare is I went there last year for the A&M game, Mike, and it was 2, 3, and 5 teams at the time. One of the best experiences I've had, and you see the shirt I'm wearing, and we, you guys all know at this point that I grew up an Alabama fan. Going to Jordan-Hare for that A&M game was incredible. It was so cool to see the traditions they had there, the fans. I mean, again, 3 and 5, and nothing really on the line. And it was I'm not a Braves fan, which is probably another thing people don't like about me. Anyway, but it was awesome to see. You brought the point. I think it's a really good point, and I'll piggyback this with another point you made earlier today on Twitter, which was they're 22-4 under Kirby Smart on the road since he's been the head coach at. This is bad. I am sadly a Red Sox fan and have been since like 1997. So I'm just a douchebag all around. Mm-hmm. But you talk about like the Auburn thing. I remember saying this going into 2021 in the SEC championship game. You got to put Georgia into a spot that they're not familiar with at all, but also all too familiar with. And what I meant by that then was if you get them down at the half when they haven't been trailing all season past like the second quarter and they're down by double digits, and then you're like, oh man, are we like we haven't been in the spot yet? Like, how do you respond to that? And then you're already on the road, like you said. Like, and another thing that could happen too, when you talk about them going on the road, all 4 of those losses during the Kirby Smart tenure on the road in SEC games were to SEC West teams, and it was all games that they were favored in, besides the Bama one in 2020. All games, I know they had a lead in that game, but they're 0-4, and they lost those games by an average of like 22 points per game. So this is those 2 are the only ones I could possibly see. But you also are talking about an Auburn team that might not know what they have yet because of what they have at quarterback and try to get Hugh Freeze's offense in year 1.
So Georgia's done. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. All right, how about Tennessee's schedule here, Chris? We've got a lot of wins, and again, this is from a homer perspective, so maybe you may disagree with, but you kind of said you kind of agree with at Alabama's a toss-up. I think you and I have kind of disagreed on this one too. The Florida game, the importance of that, I think it's monumental. A&M.
On that.
A&M could be really good. They could suck again. I just can't figure them. So that, to me, that's a toss. And the only loss I have, or likely loss, is Georgia. I don't care where that game's played. Any of these other, disagree with any of these. Maybe others should be tossed, or maybe a loss in there.
I've been saying this for several weeks, and it's going to come back and bite me in the ass. I already know it. But I don't disagree with you, and I don't know where that even came from about the Florida thing, because this is a team that has had your number for well over a decade and a half now, and you beat them last year. That game was still pretty close, right? It's a huge win. I don't know. I don't think Florida's going to be great. I do think that they're going to be coming into that game at 1-1, and it would be a disaster start for year 2 of Billy Napier to be 1-2. So you got to probably pull out all the stops. And it's not a team they have a history against that has been really in their favor. This game right here, September 23rd, I'm telling you right now, this game.
Are you still with this UT? Can you name 5 UTSA players right now without Googling it?
Absolutely not.
No.
But, look, I don't know one. I don't know what single UTSA player. I just found out they were the Roadrunners because someone named Meat Nation followed me yesterday when I tweeted about this. And I think Tennessee wins this game. But I'm telling you, from a trap game standpoint, you talk about this game against Florida, which is a big emotional game you got to get up for. God forbid it's a close one. This game right here against South Carolina, a school that knocked you out of the playoff contention a year ago when your quarterback went down, they ran out of fireworks because they scored so many points on you. That is a revenge game they're going to win in Neyland. They're going to be looking forward to that. I think they probably win this one. But this game right here against a team that won 11 games last year, returns a ton of production, back-to-back whatever conference they're in, champs. I just think it's going to be closer than Tennessee realizes right now. It maybe Heupel gets them coached up to where they don't overlook anything, but I think that game, I tell you what, I think that game is going to tell us the character of the Tennessee team more than anything. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that, like, is this going to be a team that looks ahead on the schedule at all, or is this a team that has week by week will handle their business and they have matured in year 3 of Heupel?
One thing that's interesting, though, that you kind of glossed over, and you're not alone. A lot of people gloss over it. Hell, Cousin Shane, of course, via a biased take here, but he said Tennessee's going to score 70 on South Carolina, and I'm not ready to go that far. But Are we glossing over the fact that South Carolina kicked their ass, and maybe what if South Carolina jumps out to a little bit of a lead here? Well, could they get in Tennessee's head? And keep in mind, they don't play in 2024. We know the schedule already, so there's a lot on the line here. I mean, we're talking 2 years of bragging, right? I don't know if Tennessee fans can take 3 years of South Carolina fans in their mentions.
I don't. Anybody that's in Tennessee's mentions at all, tread that terrifying experience, I can attest. So I think this. I think that the South Carolina game, if there's a game on that schedule that's a conference game that I would have the most confidence in, besides Vandy, it's that one. Because I just think that team is going to be pissed about what happened a year ago, especially with all the stuff they had in front of them, right? So 70, I'm not saying that I've learned – I'm trying to learn to stop doubting Shane Beamer, because every time I do, I'm wrong, like every single time. That being said, I really think that offense, I think with Joe Milton and some of the guys they got, Squirrel White and all that kind of crap, like they are going to be able to put up a lot of points in general. But that's the best way to put it. What Adam just said right there at the bottom. Hype will be out for blood in that game. That's for sure. I fully agree with that.
All right, let's look at what we got here. LSU. So we haven't even done this team preview yet, but I've got the graphic ready. I think LSU is going to kick ass this year. I've already proclaimed them my pick to win the national championship.
Yeah.
But I do see two tough games here. Florida State in the opener. If that was in Baton Rouge, I'd have a win there. But I do think it's fair to say that's a toss.
Mm-hmm.
And then at Alabama, that's a toss-up in my mind too. Every other game I have as a likely win for LSU. Any disagreements on this LSU?
Now, we saw Army go into Norman, Oklahoma 2 years ago. No, I'm kidding. I'm making a joke. No, so I think that Florida State game, I like the evidence of toss. I think one of the things that pissed me off about LSU last year was they lost that game. And you remember this, I'm sure. They got dominated in that game for most of the entire game. Like, It wasn't until the fourth quarter. And let's not forget, I'm pretty sure the way they had the tying touchdown was that Florida State fumbled on the 1 yard line. They had they were like a second or a yard away from putting their foot on LSU's throat and ending that game.
Right.
And they still come with the win. But afterwards, especially after they reeled off a couple wins, that team lost to Florida State, which is at the time, people just assumed LSU was going to win. I know I did. They got their ass kicked at home by Tennessee. And that game wasn't even as close as the score said it was, which is really saying something. I hated the talk afterwards of the LSU of, well, we should have won that game against Florida State. So, we should be in national title contention. And they were. That Florida State game, again, they got your ass kicked. I don't – or like for the most of the entire game, I think that is going to be one of the best games of the year. I don't think it necessarily keeps them in or out of the playoff if they lose it, right? The rest of the schedule, they lost to Mizzou last time they went to Como.
Yep.
I don't think that happens again. They have one loss to Auburn since like fucking Y2K. In Tiger Stadium, and it was the last time they were there.
That was the Bo Nix Superman game, right?
That was the Bo Nix Superman game. I was there for that, and it was an incredible game. It was like ridiculous. But I think there's something always happens with Florida, just always. But you get them at home, and you get A&M at home, which I like. Obviously, this game right here you have as a toss. I think LSU fans are more confident than ever, and they should be because you're going into year 2. It's the year you make the biggest jump from with a head coach and a new head coach. Brian Kelly is a phenomenal coach. I love what he did in year 1. Whatever I say is going to come off as bias unless it's like LSU is going to beat them. I thought Alabama was going to lose that game last year going into the game, and I said it all over radio and all that kind of shit. You've beaten Alabama twice in the last 11 games, and you did it by a combined 6 points. One of those years you had Joe Burrow. One of them you went to overtime, scored on the last play of the game. You beat them. I think you made the comment earlier about Carson Beck and the assumptions. This game, more than anything, is the assumption game I think that people are making. Like LSU has turned the corner. They have not consistently beaten Nick Saban in any of the years he's been there. I think it's only happened once since he's been there. They beat him back-to-back seasons. I don't see that happening again. I just don't. Maybe Tennessee, I see Bama losing to them way more than I see them losing to LSU.
I agree with that. All right, let's go to Arkansas. A lot of tricky games here, much more manageable schedule than they've had under Sam Pittman to date. I think the early season they can win all those games. I think, the tail end, there's some tosses there, but I think they could win the last 4 or 5 games. It shouldn't be too difficult to win the majority of those. Not saying they're going to win them all, but at LSU, at Alabama, those are the only likely losses I have with a ton of toss-ups. Thoughts on this schedule? Any disagreements from you?
You made a comment earlier about how I get upset about something every 30 minutes. I'll just tell you right now, me being the Ray Lewis Defensive Player of the Year, I thought this said F you, and I thought you were just trolling me, but it says F I. So there's that. The BYU game, that's a game I was shocked they won a year ago. I think they start out 3-0. Going to LSU, and side note, that game being played in September is an effing tragedy. And I hate it. This game against A&M, it seems to be the one that's like a catalyst for them to an extent, because this month right here is where Arkansas has thrived for the past couple seasons. October, it gets a little bit more difficult. I don't think that Ole Miss is something that would scare me as much. I think LSU is probably a loss, especially on the road. You assume Bama's a loss. Mississippi State, again at home, I don't think the Florida game is as much of a toss as I would consider that a win, just because of the fact that Pittman will have them ready. Pittman's familiar with Florida in general, especially with this time in Athens. But they're going to be coming off a game where they are just like licking their wounds, I think. Hasn't Arkansas dominated Auburn? Or is it the other way around?
No, it's kind of the other way around. But of course, that was the Bo Nix spiked the ball backwards. That's not a legal play, but they counted it.
Okay, so I'm completely wrong because I'm pretty sure they've won like 5 of the last or like 6 of the last 7 or something like that against Arkansas.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, but I still think we'll see where Hugh Freeze has them at within. I think Auburn has a chance to reel off 5 in a row there. You're really high on KJ Jefferson. I saw a stat the other day. He's like one of only 3 players that's returning with back-to-back seasons where he's at a top 10 QB rating. It kind of feels like they're going to go as far as he takes them. But I think that defense could possibly be even worse than it was a year ago, which is really, really scary to think about.
Right. Well, what about Mizzou? Are you high on them like a lot of other people? Hell, Shane thinks they could win possibly 10 games this year if they can get over Kansas State. Which I get it. Kansas State killed them last year, but this year it's at home. If they can do that, I mean, they can build some serious momentum. Likely will be 5-0 with LSU coming to town. You said it yourself. Last time LSU came to Missouri, Missouri came out on top, and that was a drink first year.
Yeah.
COVID didn't have a lot of time to implement, his system. They still got that W. A lot of potential wins. Is this the year Missouri breaks out, you think?
One, they've already broken out because they won the Division II of their first 3 years. People seem to forget about that. But
I guess I mean under drink more.
Yeah, it's fair. I just want to remind people because I feel like Missouri they get shit on more than any team in the conference unfairly, in my opinion. I feel like I always have to go to bat for them. The back half of the schedule looks very difficult. Obviously, they've played Florida really well, especially at home. So I don't disagree with that. I think you're right. I think those are 2 back-to-back losses at November 4th and 11th. They dominated Arkansas, and that one I am right about. I appreciate Zach Pouncey correcting about Auburn winning 8 of the last 10 against Arkansas. But I tell you what, Missouri is a team that we constantly write off every single year. That defense 2 years ago was god-awful. I mean, god-awful. Last year, they were easily the most improved unit in the conference, maybe the country as a whole on defense. They were really, really good. And they returned like 8 legitimate, possibly 9 starters, depending on how you want to look at it on that defense. I think they're going to be good. I think 8 wins is about where like the ceiling and maybe the floor would be. I think that's what we're looking at here. I don't see them necessarily getting double-digit wins because there's still, I know they get Kansas State at home. What does that look like? But I think getting to 8 wins is a huge accomplishment with Drink this year.
Now, what's the one team, Chris? I'm curious to know if this is the team for you too, but as it seems to be for everybody, what's the one team that is toughest to read, could be an SEC contender, or it could blow up in flames? Who am I talking about?
A&M. I mean, it's
Texas A&M.
I mean, now listen, you guys laugh at that week 3 game, but as I can attest, nobody lets the Warhawks of ULM into their home stadium. That's also a spot they lost last time. I tell you what, I'm high on A&M just because I think they were so bad a year ago. It's also one of the few teams that could really pick up steam in the second half of the year because the way they have to close here, they've owned that South Carolina series, the first one they've lost to in like 8 or 9 years, like a year ago. We'll see what happens at Ole Miss. The away team between Auburn and Arkansas, I feel like Auburn's won 4 of their last 5 on the road at A&M. The game against Arkansas is obviously huge. Do you see 5-0 going into Bama?
Yeah, I mean they should be, but that's kind of where I wanted to go with it. What happens if they lose to Miami week 2?
Oh man,
can they salvage the season? Do you think, or the wheels fall off?
What if they lose to Miami by 14 plus? What if something crazy happens in that? Because then I think that you're hitting the panic button early, and I really think it's going to be an interesting situation. Also, I'm an idiot for asking, do you think they're 5-0? Because I'm literally looking at a graphic you made that has the wins and losses already listed in neon colors. So pardon me for my ignorance. But when you talk about A&M, what is interesting about them is they could theoretically start this season with 3 losses in the first 6 games, right? They could also go 5-1 or 6-0, but they could start out 3-3, and the panic button would be not just pressed, but I mean pressed repeatedly or just smashed repeatedly, and then they could turn the whole thing around. So I kind of like, I feel like this could shape up into what they did in 2021. I think they are improved, but like, it does kind of have the feeling like a Jimbo Fisher special here, where it's like, oh my God, the first month or first half of the season, we're going to talk about his job being on the line, and then he's going to reel off a couple wins in the second half, end up playing in a bowl game at 8-4, and somehow retain his job for another year because they don't want to pay $76.8 million to have him fired.
As an Alabama guy, how concerned are you about going to A&M, considering we obviously know what happened 2 years ago, and then a year ago I realized Bryce Young didn't play, so we have to consider that. But for whatever reason, Jimbo figures out how to coach football the week of Alabama. Does that game concern you at all?
He didn't at Florida State, but yeah, that's fair. I think, I mean, like he also lost him by 28 in 2020. But I do think that playing in College Station is a difficult game. I do. And I don't think that that's a surprise to anyone. I hope that's not a night game. That's a place where Bama has kind of struggled. Remember 2017, the year where Bama kind of cruised through the entire season after they played FSU and then lost to Auburn at the end of the year? I mean, that was really the only game before Mississippi State that was close for them, was that road game against A&M. It was just an ugly, for whatever reason, the past couple of years, it's not even just that Jimbo's had something for them, but like they don't protect the football, and they get themselves into trouble a bunch, it seems like, against A&M. I hope it doesn't happen, but yeah, you have to be crazy to think that doesn't scare you. I mean, especially with all them boas, arm in arm, swinging back and forth, drinking 2% milks before the game all day, getting all revved up on calcium. That is terrifying.
All right, another terrifying one. We already mentioned it. South Carolina. I took some shit for having so many toss-ups here, but yeah. maybe one or two too many. But do you disagree with any of these? I mean, North Carolina in the opener, away. Technically, it's not on the road, but it's away from Williams-Brice. At Tennessee, I realize Florida's a home game, but they beat the piss out of you last year. You cannot get over Missouri to save your life. You said it yourself. A&M, aside from last year, has owned that thing, and that's at Kyle Field. Kentucky, you beat them last year, but Will Levis didn't play. They've kind of owned South Carolina, and then same deal with Clemson. They have owned South Carolina short of last year. So I don't know. Are these all toss-ups, or should some of these be wins? What's your thoughts?
I think this game, and the ones on the right side of the page are the ones that would be concerning. Because I think if you ask, I'm living in Columbia, South Carolina now, and I think if you ask them right now, they think that this game right here against Florida is probably a win.
Right.
I think that they probably are realistic enough to think that Georgia game is a loss. Tennessee is it's a toss-up or a loss, in my opinion. I don't see that as a win, but I don't know what their fan base would say. The issues that I would have are over here, and saying that, sure, maybe UK is a toss-up, but that is not a toss-up, and that is not a toss-up, in my opinion. Those are 2 L's. And I'm like I said in the beginning of this, I've been more wrong about South Carolina than any other team we've talked about in the conference, admittedly. And I hope I am again, because I love Columbia, South Carolina. I love being here, and I love what Shane Beamer's done, the culture of that program, and how quickly he's been able to turn it around. But that is a rivalry, in quotes, that they have been dominated in against A&M, and it's on the road. That game against Clemson, Clemson's a team that could be coming in at 10-1 or 11-0, and has revenge on their mind now, and they would love nothing more than to, like, that's a game for Dabo Swinney. At the very least, he can put his stamp on winning back that rivalry and winning the state back again. And he's got the dudes to do it. I mean, like, top to bottom, that roster is significantly, well, maybe not significantly, but it's way better, I think, than South Carolina's. The issue with South Carolina is the fact that I love the 5-star freshman they're bringing in. I think he has to be a huge, huge help immediately. I love Spencer Rattler to an extent. The offensive line and defensive line were so bad a year ago, and that offensive line especially. And I just don't know what that's going to look like. If you can't protect Spencer Rattler, it's not going to be an easy season, because I don't see a bunch of guys that jump off the page to me from the skill position standpoint as of right now. So that's what worries me about South Carolina.
How about Kentucky? I'm big on the bandwagon for the Wildcats. I think they can win as many as 9 regular season games.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate for them. They catch Alabama the last year that we have to do this East-West thing, and they have to go to Georgia.
Yeah.
If we flip those and made it, I don't know, Ole Miss and Georgia comes to Lexington, maybe I'd be giving them more respect as a dark horse candidate to actually win the East. But still, I think it could be a really good season. That Tennessee game looms large. Again, Mississippi State, South Carolina, I have all 3 of those as toss-ups. The only likely losses, Georgia and Alabama. Do you disagree with any of these?
I'm so taken aback by why this September 30th is in a different font than everything else. My ADD brain is taking off. No, I think it's perfect, man. I think I know that Will Levis, I was very critical of him last year, with good reason. We're not going to give your boy a shout out. I did tell that story to this girl last night, and she was like, that's reassuring about your fans. That somebody sent you a box of wood shavings. Anyway, this is the only team maybe in the country that could lose a first or second round talent at quarterback and, in my opinion, improve. And that's not even a knock on Will Levis necessarily. It's the fact that last year with that offensive line, the way it was, and replacing 3 guys in the NFL, and I love Chris Rodriguez, and he will be missed, I'm sure. But I just think that the turnovers they had with Levis were so damning in the worst possible situations. And I think you've nailed it here. I think this is pretty spot on. I think that they're a 9-win team at somehow in here. And I think you're spot on with all of this right here. I think they start out 5-0. I think they have a chance to possibly put the nail in Florida's coffin before we even see the month of October. I agree with all that. I think Devin Leary is going to be at the end of the season possibly a first or second team All-SEC quarterback. That's how good I think he is. I think he's going to put up great numbers in that offense. And the thing that we don't talk about at all is the fact that you get the OC back, man. Cohen was just huge a couple of years ago for that offense when they did win 10 games for the second time in like 5 years or 4 years. I think getting him back is going to work wonders for that team's confidence, especially on the offensive side of the ball, obviously.
Well, I will disagree with one thing you said there, Chris. With all due respect, this fan base is hoping that they will improve after losing a first-round pick, and I'm talking, of course, the Florida Gators. Because Anthony Richardson, he was dynamic. I was singing his praises this time last year. I look like a damn genius after Utah. I look like a damn fool after Kentucky and about every other game. So he was just wildly inconsistent. He's clearly got all the talent in the world. But I think the hope is, we're not going to have that type of game breaker, obviously, at quarterback. But if we could just have someone that's consistent and is not turning the ball over and is not, one game throwing for 500 yards against Tennessee and throwing for 80 against Kentucky, maybe we can engineer some wins here. So we have yet to do our Florida preview, so I don't have the win-losses here. Yeah. But which games are you looking at this that you think Florida could potentially, maybe if we sit here right now, we say as a loss or a toss, that they could win, that could kind of change the narrative? And I assume it's probably going to be Tennessee at home and Kentucky on the road. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first off, let me start by saying that no one's going to miss Anthony Richardson more than me, strictly because there's not a better example of like my mental stability than watching Anthony Richardson play football. Just the ups and downs every single day being a battle. I totally get it, AR. I totally get it. So I think when you talk about this team, there's a bunch of games that you could consider a toss. Like that LSU game is a game I think that maybe they catch. Like if LSU comes off a devastating loss against Florida or against Bama, we saw it happen a year ago when LSU wins against Bama and then follows that game with a 3-point win against a backup QB at Arkansas. Maybe that's something where they can catch them sleeping. Even though I think that Florida is probably going to get dominated there. That October 28th game. The Utah game is so interesting to me because I think we all just have it chalked up as a loss, kind of like we did last year, right? It's the first time they're leaving the state in week 1 or 2 since 1991, which is ridiculous. I don't think that it's smart to bet against Utah, but I do think it's a game that we've all just kind of circled as like a L for Florida that we really don't know yet. Maybe it's something where that defense – I think that D coordinator is a guy that's wish he was at Bama over Kevin Steele. I'll say it. But I mean, like, yeah, like I think that realistically, you've got to get out of the month of September above 500 because if you don't, you're in a lot of trouble. You got a revenge game against Vanderbilt.
I mean, that Billy Napier's job's on the line there, don't you think?
Yeah, if you lose to him 2 years in a row, he's gone. Because here's the other thing with Florida is you have to have a rebuilding or like a get back year because that schedule is so damn difficult over the next several years. I don't know who made it. I joked around about it maybe even a week ago on this show when I said I don't know who made that schedule. Was it Kirby? Because like it's absurd how difficult it's going to be. I love what they've been doing with recruiting, but those guys don't get there until 2024. So I don't know, man. The fact that Vegas has their total at 5.5 is really, really telling to me. And I think it's I don't think it's anything against Billy Napier necessarily. I think you've got to let him get to year 3 regardless, but I don't think it's going to be a great season in Gainesville.
Well, speaking of built by Kirby, let's get over to Alabama's schedule here because they have clearly careened off a cliff without Kirby there as defensive coordinator and chief recruiter. But do you disagree here? I've got 10 likely wins, 2 toss-ups at A&M, LSU, any others that you throw in as a – well, hell, I know you're already on record. You think Texas has beaten Alabama, right?
Yeah, and I do want to follow up real quick. Kirby left in 2015 after giving up over 550 yards of offense to Deshaun Watson in that national championship game. Bama had the number 1 ranked defense in the country the next 2 following seasons when he was gone. But with his
guys, right? With his guys.
I knew it was gonna it's always Georgia fans are just it's like they're playing chess, but like while anyone else is just trying to mind their own damn business outside of Cracker Barrel. It's like that's like they are just in their own mind, they have won every argument possible ever made. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm just not realizing there's no chess tables at Cracker Barrel, and I'm an idiot. That game against Texas, I will say over and over and over again, I think that's a loss for Alabama. And the reason why is I'm a huge believer in Steve Sarkisian. I don't know if you remember me saying this last year, but I said all summer long that was going to be a 1-score game that was going to be within a touchdown, like all season. And the 2 things I kept saying was it's going to be within a touchdown, and it's also going to be a game where win or lose, Bama's not going to get credit for that game. And I think both those things are probably spot on. And they probably lose that game if Quinn Ewers is in for the full 60 minutes, right? But when Steve Sarkisian has dudes, they are really, really dangerous. Like the offenses they have are really, really dangerous. And they had a really good defense a year ago, especially up front on that defensive line. Now, I don't think Bama's going to have the quarterback situation figured out by then. I just don't. I don't think they're going to be airing it out like they did under Bill O'Brien. I think that they're going to run the football and try to play more bully ball like they used to in the early 2010s and up until – as you said, Kirby left. But Texas with a potential Heisman contending quarterback, having 2 of the best receivers, I think that people probably still don't know the most about. You talk about A.D. Mitchell transferring from Georgia and then having Xavier Worthy still there, one of the fastest guys in the entire Big 12. I think those 2 guys, returning all 5 offensive linemen, you have the second best tight end in the country behind Brock Bowers. That's going to be a problem for Alabama. That's going to be a problem. And as much as a defense, I think, is going to be improved, I think this looks very similar to the 2015 Ole Miss game where you have a game in Tuscaloosa, night game, everyone's pumped. But, man, it's hard to keep a team like that with that many studs that has that bullseye like on the calendar right now to come in and not put it. Like Steve Sarkisian on script, dude, I don't know if you agree with this or not. I think he's the best on script. He's the best play caller in the country. And
didn't you rate him 9th best OC one?
That was you asshole. I just think somebody said the chess tables are outside. Yeah, so I do think he is really good. I tell you what, the first 2 drives of that game, barring a turnover or some crazy drop pass, I think I would put almost any amount of your money because I know it's more than mine on Steve Sarkisian and Texas scoring in one of those first 2 drives in Tuscaloosa. I think they win that game, man.
Now, one team we've yet to talk about is Auburn. We've talked a little bit.
So I'll see you later, bro.
We have yet to do their preview either, so I don't have the win-loss toss here. But they're just so difficult to read with all what they've done in the transfer portal and obviously the coaching change. Any games on here that you're thinking are more likely going to be upsets that they can accomplish in year 1?
So I don't know who Ole Miss has the week before. But we always talk about with Auburn, if you can beat Georgia, if you could beat Bama, it's a win. You've lost 14 of the last 17 to Georgia. Thank God you get them at home because you've gotten your ass kicked by an average of 21 points per game in their last 10 trips to Athens. That being said, I think there's a very realistic chance that on the right side of this page that Auburn could have a 5-game winning streak going into the Iron Bowl in Jordan-Hare. And the game that I think I have circled more than anything for Auburn is that game against Ole Miss. All the stuff we saw in the offseason with Kiffin and how he was going to come to Auburn, and we all just kind of assumed that was going to happen. And then he kind of leverages the whole thing to stay. And then you get a guy that was at Ole Miss that now is at Auburn with like a checkered past type situation. I think that like if you're an Auburn fan, from a realistic standpoint, that game right there, if he beats Ole Miss, I think that is such a huge win for that program in year one because the expectations have to be realistic. Like, I haven't talked to a single Auburn fan that thinks they're going to beat Georgia. I think it's kind of a popular, sexy upset pick, even though they're a 2-point underdog, or not 2-point, 2-touchdown underdog against Bama. That Ole Miss game, man, I think that could do wonders for that program, especially going into the latter half of the season where they've struggled the past couple of years. I think that would be a huge, huge win for Hugh Freeze in year one.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Chris, we're just weeks away from SEC Media Days here in Nashville. You've got credentialed. I don't know how. I mean, someone's they made a mistake there. You're back in it. What are the big storylines heading into Media Days that you're most going to be paying attention to, or think will come out of there?
What are the storylines?
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta figure out some funny questions. Honestly, the thing I've been trying to get ready for most is my karaoke voice. Because I mean, like we didn't get to do it in Atlanta last year, and like obviously in Nashville we're gonna have to sing karaoke. I just am very concerned about which bar is gonna have my song. If I'm gonna get booed off the stage, it's gonna be a whole thing. That's my main concern as of right now, mainly because I have like, and you get this probably even though you don't take any days off ever apparently, but this is like the only week and a half off of the entire season I feel like, or entire calendar year. So I've just been watching Suits and focusing on that. I think. I got to start actually getting my shit together, I guess, and figure out how to do my job in Nashville. So,
how big of a deal do you think Hugh Freeze will be back there? I mean, do you think he'll be? I would imagine he's going to be asked a million times, like about his second chance, even though it's really like his 8th chance. I think that's going to be a topic. I think Kirby and all these allegations at Georgia, I mean, that's hitting at the wrong time for him. I think that's going to be because down there in Athens, he doesn't have to answer to anybody. Not to say that he will necessarily in Nashville, but I think that's going to be asked of him too. Those are kind of the big ones, I think. And Nick Saban, I'm curious to see how many more excuses he's got about point spreads and this, that, and the other.
Have you noticed it real quick? Have you noticed that no matter how many different people say the same thing? They were there Destin, and Hugh Freeze said almost verbatim the same thing about NIL as Nick Saban. And you didn't hear a word about it. So I wonder if this is the time that Freeze finally kind of gets like his feet held to the fire with some of the stuff in the past, even though it's been years and years and years ago. Somebody had in the comments over here, if you had a question to ask Hugh Freeze, what would it be? If we're being PG, and I haven't had enough to drink tonight, okay? There's a little vodka in the Celsius, and I had a High Life earlier, but I don't think it's going to kick in until later. I would have to ask him, like, what percentage of his recruits have ever actually played Yahtzee? Because every time he gets, like, a new player, he puts out this fucking video of him being like, Yahtzee. I'm 37. I've never played Yahtzee. I haven't had that many rain-ins at a lake house that I was stuck at, so I don't know why you would be playing Yahtzee. But that's probably the only question I can think of. I need to write that down. I don't know, man. I think it'll be interesting because I wonder if he, like I said, if he's going to get his feet held to the fire. The Kirby thing is interesting too, and I'm not going to get into it because I'm not dealing with their effing fans on Twitter right now. But like the fact that everyone is just kind of assuming the AJC is out to get Kirby Smart and UGA, you know as well as I do that if this was happening at Florida, if this is happening at Bama, this is happening at Tennessee, Georgia fans would be all over it, right? But it's their team, and so it's like, and we're all fans, so I totally get it. But like, and you want to believe the best in your program, but 60 violations in the last 3 to 4 years, it's at least a story. It's at least a story. And so I wonder if people are going to ask Kirby that. and what he's actually going to say. And then from there, Mike, I wonder if he's even ridiculed or held, not held accountable, but like if there's a negative perception of it. And I admittedly don't know enough about it to where I would want to weigh in and try to persecute anybody or know all the facts of the story. I don't work for Barstool, so I'm not just going to go slander somebody's name and then throw them under the bus with a made up story for no fucking reason. Excuse my language. But with Kirby, I wonder if anything's even made about it because it's kind of been swept under the rug if there's even a story over the past couple of years.
Yeah. Well, that same Barstool guy said Ohio State's joining the SEC about 2 years ago. So, take everything he's got to say with a grain of salt. Will Alabama or LSU be the pick? I'm not asking you specifically, but what do you think the media as a whole? Who do you think they pick, LSU or Alabama in the West?
Such a good question, dude. I want to say it's Bama because it's always Bama, right? But I think the pick, how many people are going to be there from Alabama? Because that's kind of the main question I have. I think if there's ever a year where it is LSU, it's this year and what they return. I part of me kind of leans to the fact that it would be LSU, especially after the last 2 seasons of watching Bama kind of struggle more than they have in any time in the Nick Saban era since 2007.
How many people pick Vanderbilt to win the SEC? And the only reason I'm not trying to make fun of them. Someone literally, I think it was an old person. If I had to guess, people, it's kind of not really. It's not really confusing, but it's electronic. You got to click. I don't know. I think someone screwed up. But how many people vote Vanderbilt to win the entire league, like the one person did last year?
Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it's the only damn team in the conference that has a V in the name at all. Let alone starts with a B. And it's also at the very bottom of the list. Even if you were bored, you wouldn't want to scroll all the way down there and pick Vanderbilt. I would love to know who did that. I hope it's the same asshole that got mad at me for bringing up gambling lines. I don't think anybody picks Vandy, but if they do, it's Clark Lee. It's 1,000%. It's just, I saw a thing on 3 today that said anonymous coach says Vanderbilt's improved. I'm like, it's Clark Lee. Clark Lee is the anonymous coach. The call is coming from inside the house.
Who do you think gets voted all SEC first team quarterback? Because I honestly think that'll be an interesting one too.
Yeah.
My vote would go to KJ, but I could see Jaden Daniels and I would imagine other people are. I think some people are even going to vote Joe Milton. Who do you think will get the most votes there?
I think it'll be KJ and Jaden Daniels 1, 2. It's usually more of a career award going into it. The way that people fill those out is you feel like you kind of know. Remember Jermaine Burton, I think, was first team last year, which was ridiculous at receiver. Right. But like at the skill position and the quarterback position, all that kind of stuff, I feel like it's people that are either returning. It's like hardly anyone's like a shot in the dark type guy, right? Mm-hmm. And then whoever's on the offensive line, once you get to third team, it's like, all right, whoever for Bama that I haven't put on there or Georgia I haven't put on there yet. I think it's KJ or Jaden. At the end of the year, though, I think it's going to be Carson Beck or Devin Leary.
Interesting. Also, to go to the media ballot, I think what people do, if they don't know, they look at who got brought to media days. Because last year, safety from Tennessee, Trevon Flowers, got voted all SEC. He was one of the 3 players. He's a decent player. I mean, that's kind of like the kindest way I could say it. We all know Tennessee's secondary was awful. He got voted all SEC, I think, because he was one of the representatives, and the vast majority of people couldn't name a safety out of the SEC to save their life. You frozen there? I think it was Chris that voted him there. But I guess we're frozen. I guess we lost him. But, hey, just want to say thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Different format here with Cousin Shane, MIA. Apologies for he's under the weather here. And we're heading into 4th of July weekend. So I don't honestly know when the next show will be. But you won't have to wait too long for it because we got this. We've got our fall camp series to continue. Shane and I are going to be actually getting together for the 4th of July weekend for a couple in-person shows. So be on the lookout for that. We got you covered next week here, all off season. I want to appreciate all the cousins for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.